my other two colleagues are right outside.
Commissioner, we need 4, but that's part of the state statute.
What is part of the statute?
That section D. That's it's
okay.
a mandate.
Okay.
You can get specific.
Just waiting on my colleagues to come back in and we'll get started.
Dan White's looking over your shoulder back.
Okay.
He's every place. He's in back here too.
Oh, there's Van.
Yeah.
You got any problem with that?
Well, you convinced me.
You got a big toothy grin.
Well, we're going to call this meeting to order. Want to just welcome our president, who's Skyping. He's now in D.C. at the National School Boards Association meeting. So welcome, Mr. President.
He waves, okay.
Hello.
Can you say hello again, Mr. President?
Yeah, hello.
Oh, that's better.
Oh,
you hear
you sort of, it's choppy.
You want me to huh?
What did he say?
Oh, he's gonna be soon now.
What is that?
Can we get somebody from communications to help us out? They're sort of breaking up in our president. We'll try to fix that soon, Mr. President.
Okay.
Okay, speakers, we'll go to the next item. Speakers addressing an agenda item, beginning with Bridget Monroe. And we'll ask you, is Ms. Monroe here? Would you sit right here at the end, please?
How are you?
Yeah, no. That makes sense.
Hello, Commissioners.
Good evening.
My name is Bridget Monroe.
I don't even know if they're
I don't
on.
think it's on.
Can you hear? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Probably have to put your mic on. Right up to the mic.
Testing. Can you all hear me? Okay, thank you.
Okay. My name is Bridget Monroe, and I'm here today representing myself. As you know, the first public discussion forum about the proposed 2015-16 budget occurred 3 nights ago at School 33. Last night was the second forum, and the third forum is scheduled for February 5th. As a result, very few people are aware of the magnitude of the contract that you are considering today. It is troublesome that one of the major drivers of the budget gap, which is the EPO contract with the University of Rochester for East High School, has not been adequately revealed or discussed. People who have followed the meetings at East are likewise surprised by the additional $10.4 million estimated for East High School. This nearly 47% increase was never a topic at those meetings. As it stands, the projected structural gap is $40.5 million. Added to that is the desire for an additional $15 million to fund academic priorities across the entire district, and then an additional $10 million for one school. As we know, the state has not committed to any increases, much less revealed preliminary numbers for any of the districts in New York State. I question the wisdom of drafting a budget that pins its hope on additional state aid to make it a balanced budget. Moreover, while I certainly believe that every single student in this district deserves a high-quality education, I do not agree with the exorbitant salaries, top-heavy administration, and lack of achievement measures in this contract. At a time when the entire community has finally begun focusing on the problem of extreme poverty in the city of Rochester and the concentration of impoverished students in our district, I find it utterly unpalatable that the University of Rochester is not approaching this contract as a partner or perhaps even a beneficent, wealthy institution of education, but rather demands top dollar for each of the many components going into their plan for East High. The only reason there are not more parents here is because too few people are truly aware of what is going on. Even if the state were to grant us an additional $10 million to hand over to the University of Rochester for this contract, we all know that there is no guarantee that such generosity will continue for the life of the contract. And most assuredly, this would not continue for the life of the school. So where would the money come from except budget cuts to all the other schools in the district? You know we have great schools in this district that people have been asking to be replicated for many years. Yet money has never been found for that, and in fact, too often, the same in-demand schools are shortchanged and cannot properly fulfill their mission and educational promise.
Thank you. Thank you. Karen Fox? Yeah. Karen? All right. Karen is not here. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the presentation of East High School EPO proposal. I'd like to introduce Dr. Stephen Ubing of the University of Rochester to deliver the presentation on the East High School and EPO budget proposal.
Hi, I'm Bill Ansbro. Dr. Ubing has asked me to join him here because while not involved in the development of the budget or the negotiation of the contracts, in the spirit of transparency, we both worked together to develop this presentation, so the board, can make informed decisions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ubing.
And let me just, before we start, let me just say, let me just congratulate our president for being the champion on this initiative. We have been very interested in ensuring that we have a program that we believe will be successful. And the fact that the U of R stood up or I should say the president strongly recommended that they, to do this EPO, stood up to take on this challenge, and the hard work that's been involved in this particular challenge. See, I don't think $10 million it's a small price to pay, in my opinion, when you talk about educating, particularly urban students. And so whatever we can do to educate urban students, I think we need to be trying, because as I've said in the past, what we've done in the past is not working. And so we have to come up with an approach. We have to stop the bleeding in this district from having dropouts, for having low attendance rates. See, some students who are in this district, their children could go on and be successful. Most of these students in this district, if we don't take an opportunity to ensure that we've got some kind of alternative for success, they're going to be on the streets. And so I just wanted to thank the University of Rochester again and Dr. Ubing for this opportunity. And I believe that it's going to be successful. And I'm looking forward to the results, probably a couple of years from now, but for us to be able to demonstrate that here in Rochester, where we've got extreme poverty and a high poverty rate, that we could do something to change those numbers and contribute to prosperity in this community and not poverty. So thank you, Dr. Ubing.
Thank you, Commissioner Elliott.
Oh, I understand Ms. Fox came. All right, so can we have Ms. Fox to
Absolutely.
speak? Sorry about that.
You're fine.
Thank you, I apologize for being late, I missed my bus. Good evening, my name is Karen Fox. Thank you for allowing me to speak. When you continue to do the same old, you continue to get the same old. I applaud the board in looking for a different outcome for East High School and being forward-thinking enough to realize that this can be a plan for the future of urban education nationwide. Will it cost more? Yes. Anytime you start something new, there are additional costs. Our children are our future, and they are worth it. Go East.
Thank you, Ms. Fox.
I'd like to thank Bill for wearing his East tie. He has his purple tie on tonight. And I'd like to give credit where credit is due. Bill and Gary Valente made this PowerPoint. I filled in the blanks at the end, but so I really need him next to me because we're not we see this basically the same, but with a few edges where we're not the same. So I'd like to invite him to give his views. They might be slightly different than mine, and we're going to be very candid, and Bill's favorite word, and transparent. All questions we'll answer.
And you have an East High School graduate before you.
Oh, we do know that, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
And I have my East High tie on and my East High shirt on. All right, so you all know the story of Amanda, little girl at East High, and she's an inspiration to all of us because despite enormous odds, she continues. She's one of our teachers' children, and she continues to fight. And it'd be so easy for her to slip away and give up. I don't want to misuse that wonderful story, except that that's the spirit that I see when I address the faculty tonight at East. We talked about the hiring process, and there was this sense of new beginning, rebirth, and you can't keep us down. It was very impressive, to talk to the teachers at East. I was very much struck by their sense of involvement and belonging and ownership. And I think there's a couple of East teachers here. Can you guys stand? These teachers who happen to make it over in the snow, thank you for making it over. So I'm going to fly through a few of these, okay, because you know the story. That man up there on the screen came to us and asked us to take this project on. We said no 3 times, but he's very hard to continue to say no to. Let me tell you, the first conversation I had with Van White, I said, I don't want to do this because I don't want to be the one responsible for moving money from one school to another. And that's what's going to happen. This is going to be expensive. It can't not be expensive to turn around an underperforming urban high school that is a non-select school, meaning, anybody who shows up, we take. But he said to me, and Annabelle, I give him credit, you have a chance to recreate an urban model that will perhaps be a shining light, not only for the city, but the state, the entire nation. And I think that moved me, I think it moved my colleagues at the University of Rochester, and all of us decided to go after this with everything we have. So we brought you a proposal, a complete proposal. By the way, that proposal was developed with the input of over 1,000 people. And there were public meetings, there were neighborhood meetings. We talked with every kid in the building who was there that day. We got their input on what it should look like. Every teacher was invited to be involved, most were. Every non-instructional employee was invited to be involved, many were. Parents were involved. All the we talked to 3 different neighborhood associations. Joanne Larson pulled me into the neighborhood, in the middle of the summer to talk to neighborhood groups. And we did everything we could to outreach and get input. We also had to bring our professional expertise into the proposal. We didn't just say to people, what do you want, we'll deliver it. We know what best practice looks like, what works, and we were committed to delivering a school based on best practice. We spent a lot of time in labor negotiations. The EPO law suggests that it's clear that the EPO has to negotiate those MOUs. They were tedious. Couldn't have done it without Bethany. Had a long but very fruitful negotiation session with RTA, and we were able to deliver negotiated agreements with each of those, which I'll reference in a little while. So is somebody going to work that, move that along?
Can you move that?
I guess that would be you. Who's that?
I just realized.
I'll send you my invoice later.
Okay. Send it to Bill. And you can just go to the next one if you would, because I've already addressed everything here. So that's the overview of what we're going to do. If you just, we'll make a little, I'll go like that, and you move. Okay, we'll be a team. Okay, so that's kind of a summary of the budget. Our basic budget is up approximately $3,926,945. I'm going to talk about that first. That's the basic budget to run East High School as it is today, and not dip into any of the other support we're asking for from central office and the district, and the state mandated requirement that we run an extended day program, okay? There are, the $4,807,000 item is a menu list of other supports that we need to run this school, some of which would be new incremental costs, some of which would not. Some of which would generate additional aid, some of which would not. Some of which would be offset by perhaps grants, some of which would not. So we're going to try to drill down to each of those. The last, and this only came into our budgeting this week. We didn't actually ever think about transportation. But I'm going to talk about transportation for a second. When you hired us to do this, and by the way, you're not actually paying us, we said we're going to use best practice and research to make decisions. So we looked at the transportation schedule, and we looked at what was happening to kids at East High. One of the things we found was that a fair number of kids were unsuccessful in 9th grade. And the research suggests, and any of you who are parents of teenagers, I'm not going to shock you with this next one, you've heard me say it before, that kids in their teens have a lot of trouble in the morning. They don't get up very effectively. I know when I was a teenager, I was thinking about this morning. I'd sleep until 11, 12 o'clock. These days, I'm up at 5 a.m. Can't stay asleep, you know. But teenagers, I still have one living with me who's a freshman at the University of Rhode Island. They'll sleep at 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 11. And so, but younger kids, 7th and 8th graders do a little better. The other thing we know when we talk to parents is they didn't feel totally comfortable having their potentially 6th, 7th, and 8th graders on the same bus as the 9th through 12th. So we propose a split schedule with 3 separate drop-offs. The first one would be the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders arriving on yellow buses. And I have to tell you, that's more expensive, but the parents we've talked to love that idea. And having their own entrance, their own sequestered area of the building. We can't promise them they'll never see a high school kid, but they're going to be pretty well isolated from the high school kids. Then 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders would arrive about 45 minutes later. And so they'd start more like at 8:15, 8:20, and, you know, as opposed to 7:15 they do now. Some of our kids get on the bus over like at Charlotte, you know, and they have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then we wonder, geez, why are the kids always late? You know, why are we having attendance problems? Last group of kids, and I'm going to address this in some depth later on in the presentation, is we have kids who are unsuccessful in 9th grade and fail everything, every single subject. We can almost guarantee that those kids are going to drop out, because the way we do this in public education, I'm not just talking about the Rochester City School District, but the suburbs too. You fail everything in 9th grade, then you take it over in the summer school, you fail it again. Then you take it over again in 10th grade, you fail it again. You know, in essence, think about this. We're running a 6-year program here for some of these kids, because they're in high school for 6 years, and they never graduate. From a cost-effective standpoint, that's awful. If we can take that population of kids who are totally failing 9th grade and cut that in half, then cut it in half again over a period of about 5 or 6 years, forget about the social good we'll do, which would be immense, and the moral importance of what we're doing. But the economic efficiencies of actually running a 4-year high school for those kids rather than a 6-year high school, we anticipate that the initial cost that we see, not using current dollars, will eventually go down for 2 reasons. One, we want to create more functional, ready 9th graders, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders who have higher levels of literacy going into 9th grade. And 2, we want to create more success in 9th grade. So that's what this proposal is about. And a lot of this first number in the budget, the $3.9 million, is about supporting improved literacy and then supporting programs for kids who failed everything so we don't lose those kids. So we're offering them a different model after they've totally failed 9th grade. They're not going to be sitting next to the 9th graders repeating the classes. They're going to be taking one of 3 approaches that I'll get to in a little while. So we realize there's like $10 million floating around, and we don't dispute that that number can account for everything that's floating around. We don't see it necessarily as a budget increase, but that's going to be up to the district. You know, what the district does, we respect. We've had tremendous support from the district. I mean, the deputy superintendents, the finance folks, the HR folks, you know, they've been with us, and we asked for something that's right there, and we're very grateful for the level of support we've had from the central administration. I wish Bohan were here, because I want to thank him and the support we've had from the superintendent. So that's all been, I say continuously, this is a partnership, not a competition. And I recognize in some of the community it feels like a competition, especially if we are driving money into East, and where's the money going to come from for some other schools. Moving down the line, the transportation amount, $1.4 million, does generate $1,260,000 in state aid the following year. Okay, now there are ways to bridge that. I'm not going to tell Bill how to do his job, but there are ways to bridge that. And then the big piece that's in here, and I'll talk about this in more depth, is the expanded day requirement. As an EPO, you had a choice. Some of these choices weren't very, very happy choices. You could have let East become a charter school. Then you wouldn't have had to worry about the budget of what East is spending, and you wouldn't have to worry about the aid. You would have been spending money to support the charter school. They would have been sending you a bill for the kids who go to school there, and you would have to pay it from the aid you get from the rest of your kids. It could have been closed down entirely, which would have been a moral failure, I think, on the part of all of us. It could have been run by SUNY. Nobody's ever done that. You know, I don't know if you can do that. It could have been phased out and phased in, and that's probably, if we don't succeed here and get this moving, that's probably what will happen. So let's talk a little more and go to the next one. We're saying, though, that the net difference after those things is about 4.7 million. Go back one more, I'm sorry. The bottom line, we're seeing the net difference when we take out the mandated things that you have to do, you really don't have a choice on, and the ramp up for literacy. So we're going to go through all these things so you have a good understanding. We're a great team. So the extension of the school day, we have in the budget $2.2 million for additional compensation for teachers and others, administrators, non-instructional employees, for the cost of moving to an 8-hour school day. It's a bit of it's not exactly aligned to that term. So if you've read our contract with the teachers, this is a revolutionary employment agreement with teachers. We're not simply paying them for working another hour and a half. Our teachers will be the hardest working, most accountable teachers in Monroe County. There are no teachers who will be held to a higher standard of accountability in terms of their work requirements than our teachers at East. They have essentially given up the idea of a free period. Now they have 2 planning periods, one that's collaborative and one is very focused on individual planning. They have agreed, our teachers have agreed to, when necessary, and just to set the record, we don't plan on giving them all 6 classes, but when necessary, to pick up another group of kids and go up to 6 classes to catch some kids up where they need to be. Currently in the district, that would generate a request for another 20% in compensation for that teacher. Our teachers, that's part of their contract. Our teachers have agreed every single day to work with a small group of students that we call, for now, we may change this, the small group family, on issues around organizational skills, personal identity, how to get along with other kids who are perhaps bothering them. Now, this small family group is powerful, not just in terms of what we can do academically, but what we can do attendance-wise. See, we want our kids, when they come to school, to feel that somebody's waiting for them to see them. Somebody is really hoping they're going to be there. And that teacher or counselor or the principals or whomever is going to build this sense of belonging in that small group. That's part of our teachers' contract. So we're asking our teachers to do, including after-school faculty meetings, is beyond what any teachers do. And I know every contract in Monroe County, part of one of the classes I teach. And just for the record, our teachers approved that by a 77% majority. That's for $56 a day. You think about what we do now in terms of teaching extra class, could be 20%, $37 an hour for every hour you work. Hour and a half be 56 anyways. Taking a small family group, what's that going to cost? Our teachers have said we want to be all in all the time. That was the criteria that we placed out there. I'm very proud of the teachers at East High School for stepping up and saying, we know this is a revolutionary work agreement, and we're willing to step forward and start that work at East High School to do something special. I think it's a great agreement, and I think you should be very proud of them. They really speak well to the profession, I think, and their willingness to go forward. So we have a proposal. This is part of our, actually, this is kind of confusing, so I'll come back to that, okay, because it kind of breaks down, right?
Yeah, what this represents here at a high level are their programmatic components to give the board a sense of where the money's going. And then each one of these, the next slide, Steve sort of breaks it down, and then you might want to speak to it as we get further along.
So my colleagues, and especially my students, would tell you I have a terrible habit of not speaking to the slide. Sometimes there's absolutely no relationship between my presentation and what's on the board. So if I do that, you are allowed to say, Steve, pay attention. So let's you can see all those. Now let's go to the individuals. We'll go along. So we're looking at first year. 6th grade is an unknown, by the way, because we're not asking the board to require any 6th graders to come to East High School. If they want to come, we think it'd be great to get the literacy launch going. But we're not going to ask you to require any sixth grade to close, and those kids have to come. And it's not impossible that a month from now, I'll be back here saying sixth grade is not going to be a go at East High School. We're out there advertising it, we're talking to parents, we're getting a lot of interest, but it's not a done deal that it's going to happen. Seventh and eighth grade, in the future, right, this is what it's going to look like next year. In the future, we'll have 160 kids in both seventh and eighth grade. So that way we can let 20 more kids in ninth grade, coming from the K-8 schools. And then we're going to try to average 180 kids per class all the way through. What the difference is, our kids, I believe, are going to be better prepared to go into ninth grade. So you're not going to see big results in year 1 and 2, but what you will see, I think, in year 3, you can see ninth graders who have a much lower failure rate because their literacy and mathematics levels are going to be improved through the rigor of the curriculum instruction in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And you're going to see a very rigorous and very engaging ninth grade and less ninth grade failures. That's where the money is. Quite frankly, you get a kid into 10th grade, and he's pretty much on track to graduate, I got to believe that's a 95% graduation rate for those kids there. They're going to make it, okay? Something may happen, bad things happen, of course, but those kids are going to make it. You got to solve the 6, 7, 8, 9 track problem. And that's where the money's going here. So the money's going in 2 big places. 1, improved literacy, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and 2, options for kids who fail everything in 9th grade so that we can get them back. We don't want to lose any kids. The next one, please. So I've already talked about this. This is the extended day agreement that we put in with our teachers, administrators, and others. So an administrator, for example, right now will work additional time than they're working because they have to stay the whole school day, which is 8 hours and beyond. We've negotiated some benefits in terms of their sick day give back, and we've negotiated some benefits in terms of other days they'd have to work in addition to the school year. And they're going to be working longer hours than they're working now. They get actually a smaller dollar amount than the teachers are going to get. Theirs is a percentage amount, but they too are going to step up and probably have, I give my compliments to Bethany who negotiated that for us. Really, one of the most aggressive administrative contracts, but it's very student-focused and very professionally friendly. Next one. So, problem with 9th grade. Okay, I'm going to spend a little more time on this now. The graduation rate can be traced to the 9th grade, which can be traced to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Now, we can trace it to kindergarten, prenatal if you want to, but we only have East High School. We need to develop a viable program to dramatically improve literacy in 9th grade. So we have a very, very strong focus on literacy and ELA in 6, 7, 8. Kids are going to get double periods of ELA every day. And the kids who do well in ELA, some of that's going to be enrichment so they can move ahead. The kids who struggle, some of it's going to be with a certified reading teacher. When I was in Canandaigua, I retired, and I was going to say I graduated, retired in 2006. I think from some 6 to 12, we had 6 reading teachers. And quite honestly, Canandaigua was pretty much a high-performing district. In East High School right now, 7 through 12, with relative, very, very low literacy rates, they have no reading teachers. So the model we like is to make the reading teacher responsible for the most struggling kids and to work on both skill development and holistic enrichment simultaneously. We have a great support model that my colleague Susan Meyer helped develop at Greece Odyssey, which is one of the outstanding high schools in the country. And by the way, it's Greece Odyssey. It's not one of the east side suburbs, and those kids do exceptionally well, in part because of the support program. For the kids who are not successful in 9th grade, we have 3 options for them coming back. Again, recognizing the literature on sleep deprivation and kids struggling, and we will start a little later in the day for these kids. They're not going to come back and retake the classes. They're going to take what we call compressed, standards-based classes that are going to be focused on credit recovery. So in a period of 12 weeks or so, we can get a kid the English credit. They've already had the seat time in 9th grade. They failed it. They had seat time. We can give them the English credit they need to move on. We can give them the social studies credit. Then they start the next 2 credits. And if they finish all those, we can get them the beginning of a 10th grade credit. So we want to bring the kids back into the mainstream. For some kids, that's not going to work. We are contracting with Big Picture schools out of Providence, Rhode Island, nationally recognized off-site program. They have one in Lafayette, New York, where the kids are just like our kids, and their Regents results were so good, they were inspected by the State Education Department because they thought there must be something wrong, but they turned out to be absolutely legit. Very small, a lot of reservation kids south of Syracuse. We visited that school. We visited the school in Providence, Rhode Island. We have a big picture school representative right in Rochester, and this is one of the things I want to emphasize. We are talking with the district about possibly partnering on that. So some of the things we're doing, that seem like you're doing this at East, we don't have a desire for East to be an island. We have a desire, wherever it works, to partner with the district and provide additional opportunities for the rest of the kids in the district. So the same thing is true with our professional development, which I'll talk about. I have a long-standing relationship with the Assessment Training Institute out of Portland, Oregon. Rick Stiggins, we're talking to them about a contract. And yesterday in our meeting, or a couple of days ago, a meeting with some district officials, we talked about, couldn't we partner on this and make this available to all teachers, make the workshops available to all teachers in the district, nationally recognized workshops. And they came back and said, hey, guess what we're doing? We're doing some cool stuff with Candy McKay, who was a fourth grade teacher in Canandaigua 100 years ago when I worked there. And how would you like to partner with us? And so so we talk about spending money. It's not all just about us. You see, we see this as an opportunity to learn from each other and enhance each other's practice. So that's the offsite program. The last program is East Evening. For some kids, life happens, and they can't get to school. We have kids with kids, as you well know. They got to work, and they would like to come back to school. We're going to slowly develop an evening program for kids. It probably won't start on September 1st, but probably will start a couple of months after that, and it's going to have 3 components. Component 1 is going to be course recovery for kids who need to get back in line. Component 2 is going to be some regular classes and enrichment classes for kids who just can't deal with the regular school day, but want to be able to graduate. And component 3 will be a CTE part of that. The last thing we'd like to put in East Evening is a GRE program, so that kids who are older, we don't want to lose any East kids, but some of our kids are 19 or 20, and they like to get they'd like to graduate, but they can't really come back to school. So we'll try to we would like to, in conjunction with the district, because the district's doing work here as well, build an equivalency diploma opportunity for those kids at East Evening. What I'd really like to do is offer driver ed, by the way. The kids all want driver ed, and we'd like to figure out a way to offer driver ed. So far, nobody at the University of Rochester has offered me their car, but I'm not giving up on that. So, all the suburbs have driver ed. Why wouldn't our kids have driver ed? We got to figure out a way to do this. I know the district's working on that for some of their kids as well. So I keep trying to move it on mine. It doesn't move. So that gives you a sense of the cost of those programs. And in the main budget, it's the 9th grade options and the literacy piece that drive most of the increase in the budget. That and the fact that we have to run our own little central office. You see, we have to have a district I'm the superintendent, and I've said this anytime anybody's asked me. For now, eventually we're going to appoint a very, we think, an outstanding deputy superintendent, and by September 1st, I'll back off, and that person will be the superintendent. And that person's going to have an assistant who can do all the business functions, going to have an account clerk, because we have to do audit and control issues, okay? We have all this money that goes through our fingers, not in cash, but in money. So we are subject to audit and controls. We have to have an account clerk. He has to have a secretary. That ends up being, several $100,000 that we have to put into this. It's not really an offset. We don't expect, Bohan to work one less day a week or something, so, but it is one of those realities. If you're running this separate little district within a district, that stuff comes up. So, and there's, the U of R has less of a hand in September. The following September, it'll be less. Eventually, we'll always have we'll always be a partner. We'll always have some professors who are working there, but our role will diminish to the point of I'll eventually step back and be a liaison and continue to be back and forth with the board and the state. And by the way, just for the record, I got an email from Ira Schwartz, who said that he expects our model, which they approved without change, without comment. It's unprecedented. They expect it to be a national model. And
They expect what?
They expect it to be a national model.
Okay.
So, you know, I was really proud of that. And my colleagues who were here developed that model. Can we move ahead? So there's also a health center, and this is one of those things that you just have to understand, part of the budget issue. There's currently a health center there. We're proposing that the health center be expanded to provide services in the evening, $191,000. But we're not proposing you pay for it. You know, we have people who go out and write grants to get that $191,000. And if we don't get the grant in the health center for the evening, we're not going to come back and say, now you got to pay for it. Part of our budget, but not part of our request from the school board. So as you're sorting through these things, not everything is necessarily going to result in an increase. Go ahead. One of our big pieces, this is going to be a heavier piece this year than next year, and that's our professional learning piece. We originally had more in here. We tried to get a state grant. We didn't get what we wanted to get. I've been assured by the state we're going to get something, but it's not going to be what we like. I've been assured by my colleague, Rafaela Barassi, that we could perhaps get some TQLP grants and provide some of the math training. As a matter of fact, we're virtually sure we can cut into that. But this is an example of what I mean by it's not necessarily all new money. Because right now, East teachers are getting professional development. And the Office of Professional Development, which does a stunningly successful job here in the district, is providing money for East teachers and programs. So, you know, it's not necessarily all new expense. Some of it would be new, the stuff they're not doing, but we would hope that we could open up the stuff we're doing to other people in the district and that we could take advantage of some of the stuff because we have some really great stuff they offer in the district. We want to take advantage of it. You probably are, I don't know what you're spending on PD at East right now, but maybe it's a couple $100,000, maybe it's less. You know, so it's not, and maybe we can get a couple $100,000 in grant money, maybe less, but it's not $815,000 of new money because some of it, maybe we can bring in some of the other teachers too. So it's kind of hard to clearly and cleanly identify every dollar that's new and not new. Next one. So we are committed, we believe we can find grant money for the first two items there, family community coordinator and a prevention specialist. You currently have a bunch of great relationships with community agencies, NEED, Ibero, Center for Youth. If I'm missing one, I'm going to get in trouble, so I better think hard. Hillside. And so we want to continue those. And so some of those are already in your budget someplace. You know, we want to continue what you're doing, and we want to build on it a little. I'll tell you about a program we're very excited about. Joanne Larson's going to run it for us with a community agency. We're not going to, you know, pick the community agency here tonight. But again, we don't want to give up on any kids. So we have some kids who are 18 and 19 years old, and they really they'd like to finish their high school diploma, but you know, they're not coming back to the school. It's not going to happen. So we'd like to build a relationship with a community agency around a special program for older kids. So maybe a small program, 30 kids or so, that we can move them back through the high school requirements and achieve that high school diploma in very small groups. And these programs I'm talking about, these off-site programs, they're very project-based. They usually include an internship in the local community. We have to build relationships with employers and higher education and others to take these kids on, and you know, they make the minimum wage and they go out and work while they're learning. In my own experience as a superintendent, we ran a program like this, and it's interesting. This isn't going to sound impressive when I say this, but we took this group of kids who we knew would drop out. We knew we'd drop out because this profile kid always dropped out. And we were able to achieve a 75% graduation rate with these kids over 4 years. So 75% by itself doesn't sound like a big accomplishment, but when 100% of them were going to drop out, we were pretty proud of it, that those kids made it through. We have a relationship with expeditionary learning. You use them throughout the district. You already have a relationship with them. You know, we'd like to build on those relationships. Maybe we'll just be part of it. Maybe it'll be a separate contract. Maybe this is new money. We're not sure. Maybe it's just expanding the relationship you already have. But we are going to do expeditionary learning modules 6, 7, 8, and we're going to do it in an exemplary manner. One of the things we want to do with our kids is we want to develop the sense of leadership in every kid. See, I'm a deep believer that we're all leaders, and we all bring a certain level of leadership to the table. Leader in Me is a program developed by Franklin Covey about personal leadership development. and it's not terribly expensive if you look at it. It includes, it's part of our small group work, and the kids access one of the highest performing companies in the country in terms of leadership development. And just like Big Picture Learning, where we happen to have the Northeastern representative for Big Picture Learning living in Rochester, the Northeastern representative for Leader and Me lives in Ontario County. And so we save a lot of money by, just to travel, and these people really want to do this work for us. We also are very impressed with the support we can get from Encompass. You already use Encompass in the district. You have them in many schools, including East. So we actually don't know how much you're paying them to go to East. So we don't know how much of this is new money versus transfer of money and continuation of money. We like what they do because they use certified teachers for kids who are in trouble or kids who need extra support after school. And they've had very good results. Their model, again, my colleague Susan Meyer looked at their model, visited them where they were instituting them, and they work at East right now, and they've had good results. Go ahead. So I talked about transportation already, staggered start times. We didn't even consider transportation till our meeting Monday, because we are not in a position to make those judgments, but Bill's office expects that staggered start times would cost something like $1.4 million. I have to tell you, I'm a big believer that anytime you can get the good people in New York State to send us more aid, we ought to figure out a way to do it, because it comes from the rest of the state. Admittedly, there's a cash flow problem you don't get the next year, but we think with these staggered start times, we're going to be more successful with attendance and getting kids to school, and kids are going to feel safer on the buses, especially the younger kids coming at a different time than the older kids. And so we don't have this worked out yet. I'd say we're early in our planning on transportation, but we think the net cost is $140,000. So again, you go to 10.1 million, $1.4 million is transportation, but the net cost, it comes out the next year. Go to the next one, please. So there's a lot of other things. I have to tell you the EPO planning implementation payment is actually $495. That's a mistake. It's my mistake. Okay, so we have to fix that. But I can fix that within the budget. So keystroke error on my part. We're going to be looking for a lot of new textbooks and science supplies. We will get textbook aid in this stuff. We get about $142,000 of categorical aid on textbook, library books, and software and hardware. So that'll offset it. So it's a $200,000 expenditure, but locally it ends up being about $58,000 more. Not for nothing, but I really want these kids to get on buses and go someplace. We really want them visiting colleges. We really want them, we want every kid at East to have visited every college within 60 miles by the time they graduate. We want them to be on the campus at Syracuse and UB and maybe down to Cornell. We want them to set high expectations for themselves. And nothing wrong with love MCC. We just want them to see the bigger world. And we want them experiencing things, because this experiential learning thing is about getting out and being part of the larger community. Translation services, currently the district provides that. We'll provide that. So we have actually $400,000 total for technology, $300,000 for a tablet program, and $100,000 for miscellaneous technology, so that's a misnomer. You get, what was the total you get from the Smart Schools Bond Act, Bill?
$47 million.
You get $47 million from the Smart Schools Bond Act. We don't expect all that. But on a per pupil basis, we would get something like $2.5 million in the long run. So all the money we're hoping could be debited against the Smart Schools Bond Act. So there's a potential of $2.5 million set apart. It's $47 million. You go to the next one. This is our overall administrative view. We're going to have two principals. This does, you see, we're creating two small schools here. And so I recognize it feels like more administrators than we need. Two small schools of about, your most successful schools tend to be smaller schools. World of Inquiry is not a big school, and so we're going to push real hard to get two separate beds codes, and we think we'll be more successful there. And so it's a little district, so I have to have a superintendent. The deputy superintendent's going to be the superintendent. We have a lot of social emotional support service, and we have a lot of volunteers, and we have a lot of agencies in the building, so we need somebody to control all that. That's the director of pupil personnel services. And we have our own athletic director. We have 2 now, we only want 1, and we have our off case. So that's a district expense now, but we're going to take over special ed up to the point of referral out of the building. You know, if this committee refers to a off-site placement, then we would look for the district to help us. We're looking for the district, by the way, to help us in everything. You know, I was with Harry Kennedy and 2 of the lawyers from Ed's office, and they asked us what we're going to do about labor negotiation. I said, we're using you guys. You know, we get above a low-level, you know, grievance. It's going outside. It's going to you guys. We're not going to issue paychecks, for example. We're not issuing our own insurance policy. We're not going to have be in charge of paying for our own heat and electric. You know, we're still part of the Rochester City School District. You are our Board of Education. I, for now, will be your superintendent. But, so we're not a separate from the rest of the district. We're not a separate island. We want to be partners. Go to the next one, please. We are proposing 21.6 additional teachers. 11.7 of those are reading teachers. Several are ESL teachers. How many? Yeah. And I can tell you, the rest of the district's going to have to face this too, because the new regs are going to require every district in the state to look at their ESL staffing and figure out a way to meet the regs. You may have a couple of years to do it, but it's going to be something that every school in the state is going to have to face. We have counselors now looking also at career skills, not just the regular counseling. Thank you for the social workers last year. And this other leadership support is actually your department chairs and the stipends they're paid to be lead teachers. In the end, we have 22.7 new people over there. And the emphasis is on literacy development and on creating a successful alternative after 9th grade. You take literacy development out, ESL out, and the 9th grade recovery out, and that's about all of them. That's really about the entire additional staff. But we think if we don't do that, as the speaker said earlier, we won't change it. You see, you can't keep doing the same thing and accept different results. Next one, please. We're going to have, because of the central office piece in part, and because of the 2 principals, additional secretarial support. And Carmen, I saw back there, Carmen she was in charge of this. She wanted about 10 more people. So, you know, but you know, trust me when I say, the great philosopher Mick Jagger, who said you can't always get what you want, my team and staff heard me say that more times than anybody can count. And there's a lot of things that requested that we didn't put in the budget. Next one, please. Paraprofessionals and TAs. We maintain that with 2 additional TAs, but we drop them off in other categories. It's really a change in what they're doing rather than big. It's the same total number. And so let me just say about this. You notice I only have 1 person in ISS. We have 2 there now. That's in school suspension. Our goal is to create a different way of students getting along. Now, by all means, we're going to have required disciplinary policy. Kid brings a weapon to school, he's going to be out of there. We're not backing off of sanctions. But for the most part, we want to train our teachers and to train our kids to see each other as having inherent value and dignity and to work through issues themselves, rather than just being sent out of the room all the time. You're familiar with the concept of restorative justice. All of our folks are going to get trained in this concept. We're going to implement it. The Leader in Me program that I talked about earlier will support that. And the other thing that's going to support that is the small groups, the advisory groups, because that's where a lot of the control mechanisms are going to be put in place. This is not meant to be a criticism, because I get it. I understand why kids get suspended. I understand why controls are put in place. I get it. But we're going to try to change the culture from a control-based culture to a culture in which people belong and want to make it better because it's theirs. And that's the notion of restorative justice. I don't know if do you think I did it justice, restorative practices is the mechanism towards restorative justice. So moving along. So we, not for nothing, but we'd like the building to be a little cleaner. And we're going to have to add a couple of custodians and groundskeepers to do that. The reason the additional security person's in there is, if we don't do 6th grade, we'll probably cut that, okay? But we want to assign a person to really, we want 6th grade parents to really feel safe in the building. We want to be able to say, listen, this is Bill over here, put a uniform on Bill right now, and Bill's going to be in charge of your wing. He's going to make sure your wing is safe. And because as we build 6th grade up, we really want people to feel comfortable about that. And by the way, those people work really hard, and they're relatively low-paid people, so it's a great investment. Next one. So right now, we buy computer services from the district. You don't buy them, they're assigned. So that's an example of something that's in our budget, but it's already in the district budget, so it's an offset. We are not going to have a wellness center coordinator. We are going to have a library clerk, so we end up with one more person. The computer technician is really not a new person. I mean, I was talking to the computer technician today who's from the district, who's going to hopefully be there all the time. So it's a person who already works for you guys. Go next one, please. So this is Bill's part. I'm going to sit back and give him the microphone.
Thank you, and I certainly appreciate Dr. Eubing's effort, and all his time in pulling this together, especially, driving in from Canandaigua in this tough weather. So we also have a fiduciary responsibility to figure out, how we're going to make this work. And I think, one of the things, as I listen to this is a number of things that Dr. Eubing has identified are things that we've been working at, right? The notion of expanded day, we've embraced that model. That model cost about $1,200 per kid. And using that sort of theory, it would be about $2 million for East High. So in the notion of reading teachers, you've heard us talk relentlessly about how a couple years ago he had 0, now we've got 16, and our desire is to add more and more reading teachers across the district. So I certainly, don't take issue with sort of the desire. The question is how we pay for it. So the proposed, $10.1 million, we rely on the state to come through with that money. So that's the nature of where we are as an urban district. So absent that, Dr. Eubing has made it clear to me that, with or without the state aid, once we leap, the EPO is going to require, this additional $10 million from us. So, if we're successful in getting that additional $10 million, then we'll know where we are. We also have, increase in state aid request for all the other schools. So in our current budget, we assumed a $10.9 million increase in state aid, 3%. The governor said, the state aid could go from 1.4 to 4.8%, depending upon, if we embrace his reform, we being the legislature. And so we truly just don't know, where we'll end up with state aid until the budget is passed April 1st. And so that's the process. We are in sort of a record uncertainty here because no one can recall where, state aid runs have never been run before. So that's the position we're in. And I see Commissioner Powell, nodding. So, and that's what other people have said. They just don't ever recall us being educators and people are paying for education, being in a situation. So we're in a very unique, uncertain position.
In fact, there has never been a governor's budget proposal that did not include school aid runs, ever. And since this is the same governor that called for the computation of tax caps for those fiscally independent districts based on school aid runs, the governor has set up every school district to be in violation of the law because the state is in violation of the law.
So there you go. We're in historic uncertainty is the reality of where we are right now. So, you know, given my role here and given the board's fiduciary responsibility, I need to call out that, you know, what do we do? You know, what's our ability to move quickly to execute Plan B? And that's my words, not anybody else's words, if that incremental state aid doesn't, you know, come to be. Because we're going to release, you know, our proposed budget to you, the draft budget, March 23rd. That's the calendar. Assuming the state budget, you know, is on time, which it has been since, you know, Governor Cuomo's tenure, that would be April 1st. But if that aid, you know, that we counted on for our normal school purposes and the aid, this new aid for East is not in that budget April 1st, we'll find ourselves in a position, we'll have 30 days basically to develop something significantly different. So that would be very challenging. To give some context to the $10.1 million of the scale, you know, closing school 36, you know, that's about a $4 million savings through that, just to give you some context, okay? So part of my concern here is, you know, what will that do? What will that impact be on other schools and students? You know, if this state aid doesn't occur, and so that's what I wanted to call out. And then, you know, in my role, I have a serious concern about our ability to sustain or replicate this model. You know, in the past, we've had some intense discussions about you know, sustaining our expanded day model, which is at $1,200 per child. So that's a significantly less costly model. Maybe we're not as ambitious as we should be, but you know, that had been in our long-term planning. So, you know, this model that's before you would increase cost, you know, 47%. So, you know, then, you know, there are some potential grants that we could, you know, we could use to offset that. So that's just the fiscal, you know, situation where we are. I think everybody knows that why I came here is because I felt morally compelled to come here when Dr. Vargas, you know, reached out to me a couple of years ago. So I think of all the 27,000 kids, you know, what are we going to do, you know, with balancing our budget. So we won't know, you know, until the state comes out. It's the nature of urban education. We're very dependent on the state. So I just need to call that out to be transparent about these are the risks, you know, that we could be facing, you know, in this process. So that, Steve?
So I couldn't agree with Bill more. Actually, the state's put us in a terrible position. They created this EPO concept. They create the rules of budget. They create, we're in a position right now where we are ready to launch. We are ready to appoint a district deputy superintendent. We're ready to do all the hiring, but we can't do it without full state approval, which means approval of the budget. So we recognize the terrible position the state has placed you in. But at the same time, it's not you they placed in a terrible position. It's the children of your district, and in our case, the ones we're working with, the kids from East High School. If it turns out that, unfortunately, we're not in a position to wait, because if we can't do the stuff we need to do, we won't be able to open school in September. And you know, this is essentially not quite the same budget we gave you in December when we gave you the whole plan. We made some modifications to it. We recognize it's expensive, but we also believe it's an investment that will yield less cost, not just school cost, but social cost in the future. You know, when we were asked to do this, it really was, in Bill's word, a moral imperative for not just me, but Joel and all of my colleagues at the University of Rochester. There was a sense that it was time to say yes to the kids at East High. It was time to do everything we could do to keep what Van called this historic high school open. And although we recognize it's a difficult position the state has placed you in, I encourage you to say yes and move forward so we can start our work. Thank you very much.
Professor Eubank, thank you so very much. I'd like to have a motion to discuss resolutions 456 and 457.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. President, would you like to begin discussion?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Vice President Billy. Let me just begin, as I always do, with a series of thanks I, of course, have to begin with my colleagues, you all, sitting there, listening to this wonderful, very thorough presentation. Bill uses the word transparent. That's what you received, a very transparent, thorough examination of the budget, the good things and the challenges. And this Board of Education has done more than that. They have probably looked at and examined countless emails describing this process, attended meetings at night in executive session as we resolve this and other issues. So the first thanks should go to my colleagues sitting there who understand the moral imperative that Dr. Ewing is discussing. This is the civil rights challenge of our day, and this is our moment. This is our moment to do what our predecessors did when faced with similar civil rights challenges. So I want to thank my colleagues in advance for, I believe, responding to the challenge, responding to the moment. But I also have to thank the U of R, and I have done that before, but it's worth repeating that thanks. Joel, Rafaela, Steve, and others, Joanne, and others that I know I'm going to forget. Vice President Elliott said in describing her listening to President Seligman a few months ago, that this sounded like a passion of his, that this was a mission of his, and this was not just them accepting an opportunity. This was them accepting a challenge to make this community different, and we as a community cannot thank them enough. And I just do want to respond to one thing that Ms. Monroe said. The implication was, and I think her direct quote was, we shouldn't give the University of Rochester $10 million. Well, as you heard in Dr. Ewing's presentation, we're not giving them $10 million. This money is going towards extended day, a full and enriched summer program, 10 reading instructors, double the number of social workers. That's who's getting this money, and these are professionals who are going to help our children. The U of R is not enriching itself over this. In fact, I bet you if Bill were to do a financial analysis, he would conclude that they're probably losing more money than they will ever receive. But that's not what they're looking for here. So I think you all have been sufficiently informed that the money that is being requested here is not for the U of R, certainly not $10 million. And I think the record should be clear. And I know Ms. Monroe, and I know she's an honorable person and a good parent and a committed district parent at that. But I think that sometimes when we speak, we sometimes aren't clear. I'm guilty of that all the time. And I wanted to clarify the facts. And the facts are that the U of R has stepped up to the plate to do what no one else has been able to do. So we thank them for that. The Rochester City School District staff, Bill Ansborough for being transparent and trying to put this thing together, budget, Adele, Christiana. We have staff that have worked with Dr. Ewing and Rafaela and others to make this thing happen. And we appreciate their sincerity and their involvement. The mechanics of the plan really could not have happened without the support of district folks. Ed Lopez, Ed and I debate all the time about the role of the board. And I got to tell you, Ed stepped up to the plate. I should tell my colleagues, because you don't always see the behind the scenes work, as I'm sure Malik will tell you, that there's things that sometimes we do as board president that you guys say, hey, I don't need to have all the details. And Ed really worked hard to come up with the agreement. And by the way, Bethany, our former employee, worked very hard on that as well. So thanks to Ed Lopez and Bethany for their work. We got to thank the unions. The union stepped up to the plate and did what they didn't have to do. Dan, Marge, who is since retired, Deb Ryder, who is also retired, and Anna Urbanski. And with them, of course, are the hundreds, thousands of employees who have already and will, should the board vote in favor of this, do what is right by these kids. Steve talked about one of those teachers, Paul and his daughter. Steve was right to mention that. No one wants to be perceived as exploiting that But the first thing I want to say on behalf of the board, and I feel very confident in saying this, Paul, you are in our prayers. We know that you, as a father, reach out to make things different for your child every day and better for your child. And we also know that Paul and all the teachers at East High School have sought to make things better for their students, just like their own children. So, Paul, as you focus on your family, as I'm sure you always have, know this: we have your children at East High School. We have their back. We are praying for you, and you have our love and support. And we look forward to the time where you return to East and do all those wonderful things that you have been doing in the optics program. I want to say, though, now may not be Paul's time to be at East, but for the rest of us, the mandate, the moral imperative is clear. It is time for us to do what we have not been able to do for our students. Now is the time for the real work to begin. Now is the time, because the U of R and countless people, teachers, community leaders, have taken the time to put together a meaningful plan. Now is the time, because the state of New York graciously gave us the additional time that we needed to put together something very meaningful. So instead of doing this in 6 weeks, we essentially were given 6+ months. And I believe, as Steve has said, it has produced a plan that is unprecedented and has the capacity to produce historic, transformational change, not only in our city. And to Ms. Monroe, I would say, this isn't being done just for the students of East High School. The rollout of this, the effect of this will be, we will understand how to educate successfully and safely urban children. So to the extent that we are spending more money at East, it will be for the benefit of all of our students. Not only am I convinced that this is the right time, but colleagues, this is the right thing to do. And I pray and hope you will support the good work of the University of Rochester and all the citizens that have gotten us this far, so that we can go where we need to go. God bless. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to ask Commissioner Campos, since she's the board liaison to East High School, if she has any questions or any comments you'd like to make.
No, I think I said it before when we met, when I was at the table, what I'm really excited about. Well, one of the things that I just heard tonight is that it's about rigorous academics as well as character. And when you couple those two, that's when you create culture, school climate. So that was fantastic. And I was just so excited by your excitement and your enthusiasm towards this project. You know it inside out, Dr. Eubing, and you're so passionate, as well as your staff. Just absolutely incredible, the impact. And before you even said it, I said to myself, wow, you're basically shaping urban education in the secondary arena. And so for me, what I'm really excited about is with your Latino students, and you've got an ELL population, and being able to educate them, because as a nation we struggle with that as well, and especially within the district too. So I'm really interested to see how that works. So thank you so much, and your dedication. I really appreciate it.
So you're speaking to the father of an ESL teacher. So you should
Oh,
know
nice. Very good.
He visited every one of his kids at home and brought them a Christmas present. So yeah, I get it.
So funny. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Campos. We'll start down to my left. Commissioner Cruz?
Just a couple quick comments. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the best part of what you had to say tonight were those little words when you said our students, our teachers, our community, our families at East. That told me loads about what your attitude and that of the U of R's attitude is with regard to, this is just not a school that the U of R is going to come in and do a bunch of experimenting in. But I think you've taken each student there as part of who you are, and going to look at them as an integral part of a family at East. And the words that you used tonight were very powerful in terms of that adoption of what that really means. And I think if we can permeate that kind of an attitude with all of our teachers and counselors and administrators and our support staff, starting from the superintendent, assistant superintendent there, down to, you know, the person who's clerking in the office, really buying into that attitude, I think that goes a long way. I think the other thing you said tonight, which I thought was really interesting, was how you're working to gain a culture where each child is waiting for somebody to wait for them at school. I think that also is extremely powerful, because sometimes our children don't make those connections. You know, they make the institutional connections, but they don't make that connection in terms of, wow, somebody, you know, if I don't go in today, you know, Dr. Ewing's going to call my house and find out why. They got to talk to my mom or my dad or whoever. So I think that's extremely powerful as well. You know, I know that based on the level of dedication and commitment that has been shown not only by the U of R, but by the staff, President White has really taken this on as a mission. The support you've gotten from the administration, I know that in a few years we're going to look back, and it's going to be a moment when we look back and say, you know what, we made the absolute investment to something that has worked so well. And your words about the state, the comment about the state from Schwartz, who said he's looking forward to this to be a national model. What that tells me is that they too are invested in this. And they have put us in a tough position, but they're also going to have to step up. And we're going to have to put some pressure on them to do that. So I think we're going to have to be tremendous advocates as a board at the state level to say, hey, you're an integral part of making sure this works. The other part of this is that, and I think it's so important, and that is that we even recognized that about a year ago when we invested more of our budget to bring in more support staff at East High School. We increased some numbers of staff people who are going to be in a kind of advocate, navigator kind of role. Because we also understood that in addition to the academics, you also need that kind of enabling support services to deal with some of those issues that may not be academic, but you know, what is happening to that child when after they leave the school door and when they come in the morning, what's going on at night and in that family. And that's critically important to how that child is going to learn. And I think that having the social workers there and having the other support staff is going to be critical to this proposal as well. You know, I'm the new chair of the Finance Committee. I'm the new Willa. And I am concerned about the budget. I am concerned about the impact this will have on the budget. It was good to hear that some of these expenses will be offset by current programs, current services that we have here at the district. But I'm also encouraged by the level of commitment that you and the U of R have made to look for grants and other support funding for East High School. And I think that's critically important because, and Bill has every right to come to us and say, hey, you know, he's like the sort of financial conscience that we have. Sometimes we have battles with him, but you know, we need a financial conscience as we do our work to continually remind us that the monies we do have are finite, and that every dollar that we invest somewhere else might impact something else somewhere else. And our job is to figure out how do we lessen that impact throughout the district. But understand that sometimes we have to take a risk. And I think our district right now, you know, we're in better shape than some of our districts, especially one to the west, but we're not that far apart from where they are either. And I think we are at a kind of a precipice in this community with regard to education. And if we don't make some kind of, at times, risky moves, or sometimes a move that maybe people feel uncomfortable with, then, as you said before, nothing will ever change. And I think this is a great opportunity. It's well thought, well planned, well supported. It makes a lot of sense. It's a lot of buy-in. All of those things are in place. But ultimately, there's two areas that we have not talked about tonight that I think are so critically important. I'm going to send this right out to the folks if you're watching tonight, and that is that this cannot succeed unless parents have as much stake in this process as any single teacher, as any single principal, as any single custodian or clerk. And I don't care how many U of Rs you have and how much money we throw into this, that if our parents aren't buying into this all out, beyond what, beyond what some of our teachers are doing there, principals, then this is going to have a tough time working. Subsequent to that is, we've got to have our students also have that same high level of buy-in. Because they have to understand that in order for things to work, sometimes you have to put a piece in yourself. And that's where the value of this partnership is going to come from. And if we put all of those pieces together in this kind of great mosaic, then I'm assured that a few years from now, we're going to look back and say the national model for dealing with urban education in this country started here in Rochester. We have all those things in place. And so I absolutely look forward to this. You have, I think, the board's support going forward. And I am just excited about the potential for this project and what it's going to ultimately do for our kids and our families there. So congratulations. Thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, Commissioner Cruz. Commissioner Powell?
Thank you. If I piggyback on what Commissioner Cruz ended with and talk about parental buy-in, it's no surprise to any of my board colleagues that I had to really wrestle with my teenage daughter to keep her in school and keep her on track. And it involved going into the school for a significant portion of every single day to make sure she didn't ditch class. And I understand that not all parents can do that. Just stop everything in the middle of the day and do that. But to the extent that the parent can create an environment where there is no hiding, where the child cannot just, find a place to hide and not be accountable for doing that, then I think that's the kind of support we need from our parents. Understanding they can't give up their day job to make sure their kid gets to school, but everything short of that is what we have to expect them to do, because our kids aren't going to change their behaviors until they realize that there's no way out. The primary thing I wanted to talk about, though, is that it's only been 29 days since I left the chairmanship of the Finance Committee, so my institutional knowledge is not yet obsolete. So I want to focus on that $10.2 million. And it's absolutely correct that that's the figure that we put in this EPO budget. But what I would like to see as we go forward into our 2015-16 budget cycle is what are the actual I'm at a loss for the word, but the costs that are not simply transfers. We had a number in excess of $800,000 for professional development. We already budget significant amounts every year for professional development. A significant portion of that would simply be a shift, so I would expect some dollar value to be subtracted from the $10.2 million when it comes time for this board to consider the district's budget come March or thereabouts, when we start deliberating on that. That's just an example. We know if any of those items generate new state aid, of course, we need to know how does that altogether affect the gap. Finally, I want to talk about what we ought to hold the state accountable for in this funding. I already indicated how it's unprecedented for a governor's budget proposal to not include state aid runs. And there are 5 high-level organizations, including New York State School Board Association, that have sent a letter, signed on to a common letter, pleading with the governor to do what has always been done, which is to produce those state aid runs and to identify how the additional $1.1 billion he plans on spending on education would be distributed to what schools, you know? High-needs schools first? How's it going to happen? Historically, the State Department of Education hasn't even been able to successfully advocate for its own funding, which is essentially why it took the Race to the Top challenge, because it saw it as a way to fund itself. If we, understanding that the State Department of Education, Ira Schwartz, Cosimo Tangera, and all of his crew, if they believe that this can work, as they indicated they have because they've accepted the proposal, they need to be advocates with us for the aid. And not the $10.2 million, but whatever number Bill can come up with just the actual differential cost. If they cannot be a successful advocate, then they are an empty coffin waiting to be filled. If our legislators who approved the laws that allowed for an EPO option cannot be persuaded to fund their own proposal, then that's a failing on our part. Because when we go to advocate to our legislators on Big Five Lobby Day and the county lobby days and so on, when we go to Albany, the message we should be carrying is, you, the legislator, created this option. You have to help make it succeed. That has to be our message. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Powell. Commissioner Evans? Yeah, I'm going to come back.
The only thing I want to say, and I'll be brief, is please let's not, as we go through the budget season, say, oh, we got this big budget gap because of the U of R. I'm going to push back on that. We won't have U of R is only a small portion of a budget that's almost close to $1 billion. Our budget is almost $1 billion. It's over $700 million. Yeah, I mean, you count capital improvement, budget is huge. Obviously, I'm always concerned about costs, but let's not start a narrative where we, as we talk about the context of the upcoming budget season that we're going into, that we have a budget gap, which we have every year. Every year, I've been here over 10 years. We have a budget gap every year. So just so folks know, and I'll put it on the record, I'll push back if we're going to start our budget deliberations saying that we're dealing with our budget issues because of strictly the U of R EPO. We have budgets for all our schools. I couldn't find it off the top of my head what the current budget is for East High School, but I want to be clear that this starts off being successful. We need it to succeed. We need it to work, and I don't want it to start off with turning schools against each other, saying, oh, we can't do what you want to do over at school, extra school. Why? Because we got this U of R thing. That can't happen. East High School is the largest school in this district in terms of students at the high school level. If we are going to move the graduation rate, and we just had a presentation from ESA in this district, East High School has to be successful. We will never be above 50% if East High School is not successful. And in order for it to be successful, I'll say the same thing I said at the last meeting, how you start is how you finish. We have to start this off on the right foot, period. And in this budget, our budget issues are not originated because we're spending a little extra money at East High School. So let's just end that conversation now. And if I keep hearing that, if I hear members of the public say it, if I hear members of the administration say it, if I hear anybody else say it, I'm going to push back on it. $800 million, but almost $1 billion. This issue at East High School, yes, we need to find money for it, but that's not the reason why we continuously have budget issues every other year. Look at pension costs, look at healthcare costs, look at uncertainties, and also in the city school district, we have to spend money on things that other districts don't have to. Social workers, reading teachers, all types of things that other people don't have. And that quotient and that particular thing is not factored into urban districts' budgets. We deal with things that most people wouldn't have any clue. Get a clue. Watch the news. Look what's going on at the transit center. We have to address money that. Look how much money we have to spend on security. There are things in our budget that a lot of districts around the country will not have to spend on that because they're not operating in an urban environment with the challenges that we have. We are in this together. So we have to be very careful about trying to pit schools against each other. I'm not going to go for that this year. And I don't want to hear, oh, we're cutting this because of U of R. Don't do that, because it's not a good way to start. This is collective work and responsibility. We need to remember that as we move forward. I want to thank Dr. Ewing for his leadership on this. I want to thank the president for his leadership on this. And as I said before, I'm very supportive of this. Obviously, we're concerned about the finances, but we'll work through that. But we need this to work selfishly, because I want a graduation rate above 50%. And the only way to do that is to move East High School. It's the biggest number. It's a numbers game. So let's move the graduation rate at East High School. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Evans. Commissioner Adams?
Ms. Monroe, I want to thank you for bringing your concerns forward. It's hard sometimes. I mean, I know that there are, I've been seeing a number of people citing this $10.1 million figure and expressing concern about its potential implications for other schools. So I appreciate you coming, speaking very clearly to the issue. I know how hard it is to be in a room with, you know, where you're in the minority opinion and you're trying to express opposition. I've been in that position many times, and it's not always easy, and it doesn't always feel great, but it's important. And I think it's important because it's, you know, this is like, you know, political science theory, libertarian theory, you know, that the arguments strengthen the final decision. So if you have a dissenting opinion in the room and it's articulated well, then you'll come to a better position. But more importantly, I think, you know, you really are articulating what drives my decision making, which is equity for excellence in all schools. And I really appreciate that being held up. And for me, the excellence in the proposals that have been developed, the time that was insisted upon, SED forces us into corners and we acquiesce and we do poor work sometimes because of SEDs forcing us, you know, to do these things that end up being harmful. So to the extent that as a community there was, you know, political mobilization, there was the elite university mobilization, there was Van White, you know, never giving up. All of these things came together to, and our superintendent had laid the framework previously for the idea of partnering with universities. So all of these things came together, you know, in order to push this forward. So I'm less worried right now. I'm very, very confident because I saw you insist on the time to make the proposal. I saw the extremely high quality proposal. I see you saying we need 10 reading teachers and not saying, well, we can't afford it, so we're not going to insist on 10 reading teachers. We need reading teachers at my kids' school. We need reading teachers at your kids' schools. And for whatever, you know, decision-making process that's felt to be necessary, we acquiesce and we don't insist on what's needed. So my confidence is with what's going forward at the U of R. Another point from this sort of give and take and, you know, bringing the dissenting opinion forward is I really want to highlight that the meaningful figure that we're talking about is the $4.7 million, not $10.1 million. And so I really want that discussion, and it's a real discussion, you know, for a little over $4 million is nothing to sneeze at in terms of its ability to be distributed across other schools and to meet other schools' needs. But let's be meaningful and realistic and accurate in the discussion. So I'm commit to continue to focus on all of the schools, including East, but especially not East schools, in terms of their needs being met as we go into this budget session. So thanks, Bridget, for raising the issue. And I'd be happy to continue, like, to have more deep discussions and look at some of the historical things. I mean, even with Montessori, some of the funds that came through with like a SIG grant that could have gone to Freddie Thomas, you know, like all of these kinds of weird state funding issues and our historical funding and decisions that get made at school-based levels. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. And I would just conclude again, thank you to Professor Ewing and President Seligman, and also to our president for putting this together. It really is a change in organizational culture. And I think that as we infuse this kind of cultural change within East High School, I really believe that it's going to be a cultural shift in other schools. So I'm excited about the other effects that this opportunity is going to have throughout the district. And I would just end by saying, well, a couple of things. One is that, you talk about moving out of the way over, next year or the year after. My concern is that we continue to have and that we're able to sustain the kind of passion that you and President Seelman bring to this effort. That's what I want to make sure that we continue with, because if it doesn't have someone like you or someone like President Seelman, I'm not sure if we can sustain this in the long term. And we have to be very serious about that because we want this to continue. And then just lastly, you talked about increasing funding for maintenance. Let me tell you, I went over there to the school and I saw people just walking around oranges that were on the floor. Not having the students, to just tell the students to pick it up. It's an opportunity of responsibility for our students, and they will do it. I had the same issue over when I was at Northwest High School over there, when I asked a student just to pick up the piece of paper. So I'm glad that you're focusing also on the cleanliness of the building. We've got a new football field over there, athletic field. Will that be as messy as the school is? So I'm glad to see that we've got some additional staffing over there. So again, I want to thank you for that effort. I want to agree with Commissioner Cruz and Commissioner Powell about doing some advocacy on the state level for additional funding. Everybody is looking, and so I'm hoping that this is going to succeed. It's sort of like it's like Commissioner Cruz said, a precipice. And the question I have is that could this be a tipping point? And so looking forward to your work, and if the board can help in any way, feel free to call on us, and thank you so very much. I have a question also about Resolution 456. Can you explain this resolution? That's the one, school aid specialist. Remind me again what this is about.
Sure. This is the resolution. We did this, back around 2010 in Syracuse and Buffalo.
Madam Chair, point of order.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Sure.
Should we just go ahead and entertain a motion to
For 457.
Vote for
457?
I entertain that.
Okay,
All right.
So we can go ahead and vote on that, and then we can dispel with that, and then go into the
All
other
right.
one, so we don't confuse
Okay,
folks.
we'll do that. May I have a motion? All in favor? Is that how, am I saying that right?
We need to revise
We have a
our
motion
resolution,
to
our
consider
first motion.
We have a motion, you entertained a motion to open discussion.
To
on this.
discussion now.
Now you want a motion to consider.
So a motion,
May I have a motion to consider?
I will make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. I'm new to this, All in favor, can we take an individual vote? Mr. Cruz?
Yes.
Commissioner Campos, Commissioner Powell?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Adams?
Yes.
Commissioner Evans?
Yes.
President White?
Yes.
And my vote is yes.
Commissioner Elliott,
7-0.
may I say something?
Yes, sir.
You just talked about the sustainability of leadership, and I have to say, I've never not done what President Van White has told me to, but I'm going to make an exception right now because I want you to be able to celebrate this. Now that you've voted for this, I am going to sign a contract appointing Dr. Sean Nelms as Deputy Superintendent of East High School. Dr. Nelms is here tonight.
And as I tell all of the people who know me in this district, you got to take care of my babies.
Thank you very much, and we will live up to your confidence and support for us.
Thank you so very much. So I'll entertain a motion for Resolution 456.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? I did have a question on that.
Right, so this is targeted at exactly what you just spoke about, to try to drive in more state aid. We're hiring outside experts to come in as they have done back in 2010, to review all of our old claims to see are there opportunities to get more state aid. They only get paid if we get paid, and it's 9.5 cents on the dollar. So there's no risk, to doing this. This is a practice that's been recommended by the School Boards Association and embraced by the Big Five and other districts as well.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn? Next meeting of the Rochester Board of Education is scheduled for February 5th at 6 p.m. when the board will convene a special meeting to receive information from Dr. Vargas on the proposed closure of Charlotte High School. That concludes the meeting. Thank you very much.
Good job. We'll start governance in 5 minutes.
Oh, you guys
Chance to go to the bathroom.
We fit you guys.
Isn't that a committee of the whole, right?
No, it's not.
Oh, it's not.